What if one family held the reins of power across a continent for centuries? Their influence stretching from sun-baked Spanish plains to icy Bohemian forests. What if their decisions shaped wars, religions, and the very maps we see today? This is the tale of the Habsburgs, a dynasty that clawed its way to the top and clung there often through scandal, battle, and bizarre personal quirks. From strange obsessions to epic collapses, their story is stranger than fiction, especially for the 9 most pivotal Holy Roman Emperors who bore their name. Get ready to dive into the lives that literally owned Europe. Number 9. Leopold I. Leopold, the firstborn in 1640, was not meant for the throne. His older brother, Ferdinand IV, was the heir apparent, groomed for imperial duties from birth. Leopold, the younger son, was destined for the church. He immersed himself in theological studies, Latin, Italian, and music. He learned to play the harpsichord and was known for his quiet, thoughtful demeanor. But fate, as it often does for powerful families, had other plans. In 1654, Ferdinand IV died suddenly. Then, in 1657, their father, Emperor Ferdinand III, also passed away. Suddenly, the young pious Leopold found himself thrust into the glare of imperial succession. He was only 17 years old. A scholar, more than a statesman, yet the weight of the Holy Roman Empire now rested on his slender shoulders. He was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 1658, a position that came with immense prestige, but also immense challenge. Leopold's reign, spanning 47 years, was one of the longest in Habsburg history. A true marathon of power, he inherited a Europe, still reeling from the 30 Years' War, a continent where rivalry simmered and power balances shifted like desert sands. His greatest challenge came from the east in the form of the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, the Ottomans had been a persistent threat, their armies pushing deep into Central Europe. In 1683, this threat became terrifyingly real when a massive Ottoman force, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, laid siege to Vienna, the very heart of the Habsburg lands. The city was surrounded, its defenders outnumbered, and panic began to spread through the streets. Leopold and his court had already fled to Passau, a strategic move to ensure the continuation of the dynasty, but it left Vienna to face its desperate hour alone. The siege lasted 2 months. Inside Vienna, the people faced starvation and constant bombardment. Outside, Christian forces, led by Polish King Jan III Sobieski and Duke Charles V of Lorraine, gathered slowly. Their arrival, eagerly awaited. When the relief army finally struck in September 1683, the Battle of Vienna raged for hours on the hills surrounding the city. It was a decisive victory for the Christian allies, a moment that turned the tide against the Ottomans in Europe. Leopold, though not personally present at the battle, understood its profound significance. He saw it as a divine intervention, a sign of God's favor for his Catholic empire. This victory sparked a long and brutal war against the Ottomans, known as the Great Turkish War, which lasted for another 16 years. Leopold's empire grew during this period. Under the brilliant generalship of Prince Eugene of Savoy, Habsburg armies pushed the Ottomans out of Hungary, Transylvania, and large parts of the Balkans. These new territories, rich and fertile, dramatically expanded the Habsburg dominion and solidified their position as a major European power. The Peace of Karlowitz in 1699 formally recognized these gains, a triumph for Leopold and his long-term strategy of containing the Ottoman threat. But Leopold also faced another powerful rival, Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, who sought to expand French influence across Europe. Louis XIV's ambitions sparked a series of wars, including the War of the Grand Alliance, and towards the end of Leopold's life, the War of the Spanish Succession. Leopold fought to prevent a unified French and Spanish monarchy, a move he believed would shatter the European balance of power. Despite the constant warfare, Leopold was a man of deep intellect and cultural appreciation. He continued his scholarly pursuits, composing music, writing poetry, and engaging in philosophical discussions. He founded the University of Innsbruck and expanded the Imperial Library in Vienna. He was known for his piety, attending Mass daily and often withdrawing for periods of contemplation. His appearance was distinctive, a prominent Habsburg jaw, a reserved gaze, and a somewhat stooped posture. He was not an anatic leader, in the mold of some of his predecessors, preferring quiet diplomacy and strategic patience over grand pronouncements. His family life was marked by both joy and sorrow. He married 3 times, producing many children, though many died young. A common tragedy in those times. His first wife, his cousin Margarita, Teresa of Spain, was the subject of many paintings by Velázquez, and was known for her beauty and delicate health. Their marriage solidified the Habsburg family ties between the Austrian and Spanish branches. When she died, he married Claudia Felicitas of Tyrol, who also passed away young. His third marriage to Eleanor Magdalene of Pfalz-Neuburg proved long and stable, providing him with the heirs necessary to secure the succession, including his eventual successor, Joseph I. Leopold's reign saw Vienna transformed. The city, scarred by the Ottoman siege, rose from the ashes, rebuilt with grand Baroque palaces and churches. He commissioned magnificent buildings supporting artists, architects, and musicians. The Spanish Riding School, a famous institution for classical horsemanship, found its permanent home in Vienna. During his time, his court was a center of culture and learning, reflecting his own intellectual curiosity. He was a meticulous ruler, deeply involved in the details of governance, often poring over state papers late into the night. His health, however, began to decline in his later years, burdened by the immense responsibilities and the constant strain of war. He passed away in 1705, leaving behind an empire vastly expanded, a dynasty firmly entrenched, and a new era of European power politics underway. His legacy was one of patient perseverance, a quiet strength that navigated the complex currents of 17th-century Europe and set the stage for the century to come. Number 8. Ferdinand III. Ferdinand III was born in 1608, the son of the fiery, determined Emperor Ferdinand II. His early life was a whirlwind of education and military training designed to prepare him for the monumental tasks that lay ahead. He was intelligent, disciplined, and spoke several languages. When he was still a young man, Europe was engulfed in the 30 Years' War, a conflict so devastating it reshaped the continent. He witnessed firsthand the horrors of the war, the endless campaigns, and the famines that ravaged the land. He even took part in military campaigns, himself leading imperial armies in key battles, including the crucial Battle of Nordlingen in 1634, where he commanded a Spanish and imperial force to a decisive victory against the Swedes. This victory was a turning point for the Habsburgs in the war, pushing back their Protestant enemies and strengthening their position. When his father, Ferdinand II, died in 1637, Ferdinand III inherited a throne in the midst of chaos. The war had been raging for nearly 2 decades, and there seemed to be no end in sight. The Holy Roman Empire was fragmented, its lands devastated, and its people weary beyond measure. Ferdinand III knew that continuing the war indefinitely was not an option. He was a pragmatist, unlike his deeply devout and unyielding father. While still a staunch Catholic, he understood that religious unity could no longer be enforced by the sword. The time had come for negotiations, for painful compromises, and for finding a path to lasting peace. His greatest challenge and his greatest achievement was bringing an end to the 30 Years' War. This was not a simple task. Peace talks began in 1644 in the Westphalian cities of Munster and Osnabrück, but they dragged on for years. Representatives from nearly every major European power, from Sweden to Spain, France to the Netherlands, gathered to hash out the terms of a new order. Ferdinand III played a critical, if often behind-the-scenes, role in these complex negotiations. He sent his talk diplomats and provided them with clear instructions: secure the best possible terms for the Habsburgs, preserve imperial authority where possible, and finally, end the bloodshed. He had to balance the demands of his Catholic allies, the concerns of the German princes, and the ambitions of powerful foreign monarchs. The sheer difficulty of achieving a consensus was immense. Each party had its own agenda, its own grievances, and its own territorial claims. Diplomacy was a slow, grinding process, filled with endless debates over protocol, language, and the precise wording of every clause. Meanwhile, fighting continued sporadically across Germany, reminding everyone of the urgency of the talks. Finally, after 4 years of relentless negotiation, the Peace of Westphalia was signed in October 1648. The treaties represented a watershed moment in European history. They recognized the independence of the Dutch Republic and the Swiss Confederation. They granted Calvinism equal legal status to Catholicism and Lutheranism, a massive shift in the religious landscape. Most importantly, for the Holy Roman Empire, they significantly increased the autonomy of the German princes, allowing them to form alliances and decide the religion of their own states, though still nominally within the empire. For Ferdinand III, the Peace of Westphalia was a bittersweet triumph. While it ended the war, it also curtailed some of the imperial power that his father had so fiercely tried to consolidate. However, it secured the Habsburg hereditary lands, creating a more cohesive core to their domain. He focused his efforts on rebuilding. The population of Germany had plummeted in some areas by as much as 50%. Indrit was destroyed, and economies were shattered. Ferdinand III set about trying to heal these wounds. He encouraged economic recovery, sought to restore law and order, and promoted cultural revival. Beyond politics, Ferdinand III was a cultivated man. He was passionate about music, composed several pieces, and was a patron of the arts. He maintained a sophisticated court in Vienna, which became a hub for intellectuals and artists. He also had a keen interest in science, particularly astronomy, and corresponded with some of the leading scholars of his day. His personal life was marked by resilience. He married 3 times. His first wife was Maria Ana of Spain, daughter of King Philip III. Their marriage reinforced the close ties between the Austrian and Spanish Habsburg. He suffered personal tragedies, including the deaths of several children in infancy or early childhood. Ferdinand III was known for his calm and composed demeanor, a stark contrast to the often heated atmosphere of his father's court. He was a skilled administrator, diligent and methodical. He understood the need for compromise and was willing to make difficult decisions for the sake of peace and the long-term stability of his dynasty. He tried to foster reconciliation between the various factions within the empire, recognizing that only through cooperation could the Holy Roman Empire begin to recover. He passed away in 1657, just 9 years after the signing of the Peace of Westphalia. He had managed to salvage his dynasty and bring a fractured Europe back from the brink of total collapse, laying the groundwork for a new era in European power. His reign, though often overshadowed by the larger-than-life figures who started and ended the 30 Years' War, was crucial for shaping the continent's future. Number 7. Ferdinand II. Ferdinand II, born in 1578, was destined for a life of religious devotion and political struggle. From an early age, he was raised by Jesuits, a powerful Catholic order dedicated to the Counter-Reformation. This upbringing instilled in him an unshakable faith and a burning desire to restore the Catholic Church to its former glory across all of Europe, especially within the Holy Roman Empire. He was not just a believer. He was a crusader. His motto, Legitime Certentibus Palma, meaning, the palm to those who fight according to the rules, reflected his unwavering commitment to his convictions. He was short, thin, and often described as sickly, but his physical frailty belied an iron will and a relentless spirit. When he inherited the inner Austrian lands of Styria, Carinthia, and Carniola in 1590, he immediately began to expel Protestant preachers and re-establish Catholic control. He established special commissions to enforce religious uniformity, often leading to forced conversions or exile for his Protestant subjects. These actions were met with resistance, but Ferdinand was undeterred. He saw it as his sacred duty to root out heresy. This strict policy gave a preview of the approach he would take on a much larger stage when he became Holy Roman Emperor. Ferdinand became King of Bohemia in 1617 and King of Hungary in 1618, setting the stage for his imperial election. His coronation as King of Bohemia was met with immediate trouble. Bohemia, largely Protestant, viewed Ferdinand's devout Catholicism and centralizing tendencies with deep suspicion. The Bohemian estates, the local assembly of nobles, had enjoyed considerable religious freedom under previous Habsburg rulers. Ferdinand's attempts to revoke some of these freedoms and impose a stricter Catholic rule led to an explosive confrontation. In 1618, a group of furious Protestant noblemen stormed Prague Castle, seized two of Ferdinand's Catholic regents, and threw them out of a window. This infamous defenestration of Prague was the spark that ignited the 30 Years' War, a conflict that would define Ferdinand's reign and devastate Central Europe. Ferdinand was elected Holy Roman Emperor in 1619. Just as the Bohemian Revolt escalated into full-blown warfare, the Bohemian estates declared indeposed and instead offered their crown to Frederick V, the Protestant Elector Palatine. This was a direct challenge to Habsburg authority and a profound insult. Ferdinand responded with overwhelming force. He secured alliances with the Catholic League and Spain, and in 1620 his forces utterly defeated the Bohemians and their allies at the Battle of White Mountain, just outside Prague. The victory was comprehensive and brutal. Protestantism was suppressed in Bohemia, its nobility either executed or exiled and their lands confiscated. Ferdinand pursued a policy of recatholicization, with ruthless efficiency sending Jesuit missionaries to convert the population and imposing severe penalties for anyone who clung to their Protestant faith. The war, however, did not end there. It expanded, drawing in more and more European powers. Denmark intervened, then Sweden, and finally France. Even though France was Catholic, it feared Habsburg dominance more than Protestantism. Ferdinand's general, Albrecht von Wallenstein, built a massive, privately financed army that terrorized the German countryside, living off the land and spreading destruction. For a time, it seemed Ferdinand was a zont. In 1629, he issued the Edict of Restitution, a bold move that aimed to reclaim all church lands secularized since 1552, effectively rolling back decades of Protestant gains. This edict, however, proved to be a bridge too far for many, even some of his Catholic allies, and it only intensified the conflict. Ferdinand II faced incredible personal and political pressures. He was constantly struggling to finance his massive armies, dealing with rebellious princes and navigating the complex diplomatic landscape of Europe. He believed firmly that God was on his side and that his fight was a holy one. This conviction gave him incredible resilience, but it also made him rigid and unwilling to compromise on matters of faith. He was a deeply religious man, spending hours in prayer and confessing his sins regularly. He enjoyed hunting and music, but his life was largely consumed by the war and his efforts to establish a truly Catholic and centralized empire. The later years of his reign saw some setbacks. Wallenstein, his powerful general, became too independent and too powerful, eventually leading Ferdinand to have him assassinated in 1634, a move that shocked Europe. The Swedes continued to inflict heavy losses on imperial forces, and French intervention further complicated the war. Despite these challenges, Ferdinand never wavered in his fundamental goals. He died in 1637, leaving the war still raging, but having profoundly reshaped the political and religious landscape of the Holy Roman Empire. He cemented Habsburg power in Bohemia and Austria, laying the foundation for a more centralized Catholic Habsburg monarchy that would endure for centuries. His unwavering devotion to his faith, for better or worse, determined the fate of millions and plunged a continent into one of its most destructive conflicts. Number 6. Rudolf II. Rudolf II, born in 1552, was a prince of paradox. He spent his formative years at the Spanish court, under the strict Catholic tutelage of his uncle, King Philip II. This experience, rather than grounding him, seemed to deepen his eccentricities and his preference for a solitary life. He was multilingual, educated, and initially seemed promising. However, when he became Holy Roman Emperor in 1576, following his father Maximilian II's death, it quickly became clear that Rudolf was not like other rulers. He moved his court from Vienna to Prague, making the Bohemian capital a unique center of power, art, and the esoteric. Rudolf had a profound love for the arts and sciences, but his interests bordered on obsession. He amassed an astonishing collection of paintings, sculptures, and rare artifacts, making Prague Castle a wonder cabinet of the world. He patronized astronomers, like Johannes Kepler and Tycho Brahe, whose groundbreaking work on planetary motion happened under Rudolf's roof. He was fascinated by alchemy, believing in the possibility of transmuting base metals into gold and discovering the elixir of life. His court attracted alchemists, astrologers, and mystics from across Europe, turning Prague into a buzzing hub of occult knowledge and scientific inquiry. He himself would spend hours in his laboratory poring over ancient texts and supervising experiments. He also had a passion for botany and zoology, keeping a large menagerie of exotic animals and a vast collection of unusual plants. While his intellectual pursuits were vibrant, his political engagement was anything but. Rudolf became increasingly withdrawn, melancholic, and prone to fits of depression. He rarely left Prague Castle, often neglecting state affairs and avoiding audiences with ambassadors and dignitaries. Decisions were delayed for weeks or months, and the administration of the vast Holy Roman Empire began to falter. He preferred the company of his artists, scientists, and spiritualists to the tedious business of governance. This neglect created a dangerous power vacuum, especially as religious tensions continued to simmer across the empire between Catholics and Protestants. His religious policies were a strange blend of tolerance and indecision. Unlike his ardent Catholic predecessors, Rudolf was not a persecutor of Protestants, largely due to his own indifference to the intricacies of religious doctrine. He tolerated various faiths within his court and lands, which brought some stability, but also frustrated both Catholics and Protestants who sought clearer direction. He was wary of plots and conspiracies, often suspecting even his closest advisors. This paranoia isolated him further and made him difficult to work with. The lack of firm leadership at the top had dire consequences. The German princes, both Catholic and Protestant, began to organize into rival alliances, the Catholic League and the Protestant Union, preparing for what seemed an inevitable conflict. Rudolf's own Habsburg relatives grew increasingly frustrated with his erratic behavior and his failure to address the mounting crises. They saw their dynastic interests threatened by his ineffectual rule. In a dramatic turn of events, his younger brother, Archduke Matthias, organized a coup against him. In 1608, Matthias marched into Bohemia with an army and forced Rudolf to cede the crowns of Hungary and Austria. In 1611, Matthias also seized the Bohemian crown, leaving Rudolf with only the empty title of Holy Roman Emperor and his beloved Prague Castle. This public humiliation crushed Rudolf. He lingered in Prague Castle, a shadow of his former imperial self, surrounded by his treasures and his unfulfilled alchemical dreams. He signed a letter of majesty in 1609, granting considerable religious freedom to Protestants in Bohemia, a desperate attempt to shore up his support, but it was too little, too late. His authority had crumbled and his empire was spiraling towards war. He passed away in 1612, a mere year after losing Bohemia, perhaps of natural causes, exacerbated by his melancholic state and years of strange habits. Rudolf II left behind a magnificent collection of art and scientific instruments, a testament to his unique intellectual curiosity. His personal life was also unusual for a monarch. He never married, though he had several illegitimate children. His reclusive nature and unconventional interests fueled rumors and legends about him. He was a complex figure, a patron of genius, and a victim of his own psychological frailties. His reign marked by a fascinating cultural blossoming and a profound political decline was a tragic prelude to the catastrophic 30 Years' War, a war his indecision and neglect arguably helped to make inevitable. He was a ruler who preferred stars to statecraft, and his empire paid the price. Number 5. Maximilian II. Maximilian II, born in 1527, was a monarch caught between worlds. His father was Ferdinand I, the devoutly Catholic brother of Emperor Charles V. His mother was Anna of Bohemia and Hungary. Raised in a time of intense religious upheaval, Maximilian developed a remarkably tolerant outlook, a trait almost unheard of among rulers of his era. He was fluent in several languages, educated in the arts and sciences, and possessed a generally agreeable disposition. However, his personal religious leanings were complex and often a source of quiet anxiety for his family and allies. As a young man, Maximilian was deeply influenced by Protestant ideas, even attending Protestant sermons and associating with Protestant theologians. This caused considerable alarm in the staunchly Catholic Habsburg family, especially his uncle Charles V and his father Ferdinand I. There were whispers at court that he might convert to Protestantism, a move that would have sent shockwaves across Europe and irrevocably altered the course of the Holy Roman Empire. His father Ferdinand I even considered disinheriting him in favor of his younger brother, Ferdinand of Tyrol, to ensure a Catholic succession. This family drama played out against a backdrop of increasing religious division within the empire. Despite these tensions, Maximilian ultimately remained a Catholic, at least outwardly. He made a deathbed promise to his father to adhere to the Catholic faith, and he was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 1564. However, his personal convictions continued to influence his policies. He maintained a policy of religious toleration, particularly in his hereditary Austrian lands. He allowed Protestant nobles to practice their faith and even employed Protestants in his court. He tried to find a middle path between the warring religious factions, believing that peace could only be achieved through reconciliation, not coercion. This approach was highly controversial. Hardline Catholics viewed him with suspicion, while Protestants appreciated his leniency but hoped he would go further. Maximilian's reign was largely peaceful, a rare feat in an era constantly consumed by conflict. He avoided major wars and focused on internal stability. He tried to reform the imperial administration and improve relations between the various German states. He was seen as a fair and reasonable ruler, engaging in diplomacy and negotiation rather than resorting to force. This desire for peace stemmed from his observation of the devastation wrought by the religious wars that had plagued his family's rule. He continued the Habsburg family tradition of strategic marriages. He married his first cousin Maria of Spain, the daughter of Emperor Charles V. This marriage further cemented the ties between the Spanish and Austrian branches of the Habsburg family and produced many children, ensuring the dynastic succession. Maximilian also had a keen interest in scholarship and the arts, though perhaps not with the same eccentric intensity as his son Rudolf II. He supported scientists and artists, and his court in Vienna was known for its intellectual vibrancy. He collected books and had a considerable library. One of his significant challenges was the ongoing threat from the Ottoman Empire. Although the major Ottoman push into Europe had been halted in previous reigns, the Turks still controlled Hungary and launched periodic raids. Maximilian had to maintain a strong frontier defense and engage in complex diplomatic relations with the Ottoman Sultan Selim II. He signed a peace treaty with the Ottomans in 1568, which brought a period of relative calm to the eastern borders, a relief after decades of constant skirmishes. Maximilian also faced challenges from within the Holy Roman Empire. The growing power of the Protestant princes, combined with their desire for more autonomy, constantly tested imperial authority. He navigated these political waters with caution and pragmatism, often deferring to the Diet of the Holy Roman Empire and seeking consensus rather than imposing his will. This approach helped to prevent a renewed outbreak of religious war during his reign, a remarkable achievement given the volatile climate. His personal life was relatively stable, a stark contrast to some of his more turbulent relatives. He was known for his love of hunting and his enjoyment of courtly life. Despite his tolerant views, he was still very much a man of his time, deeply aware of his imperial duties and his family's legacy. He passed away in 1576 after a relatively short but significant reign of 12 years. His death meant the passing of a unique figure, a ruler who genuinely sought religious compromise in a world that increasingly demanded religious purity. His legacy was one of moderation and peace. A brief calm before the storm of renewed religious conflict that would engulf the empire under his successor, his son Rudolf II. He was a bridge between the intense religious conflicts of Charles V's era and the even more devastating ones that lay ahead. Number 4. Ferdinand I. Ferdinand I, born in 1503, was overshadowed by his elder brother, the mighty Emperor Charles V. While Charles inherited a vast, sprawling empire that stretched across continents, Ferdinand was groomed to manage the Habsburgs' ancestral lands in Central Europe. This division of labor, arranged by their grandfather Maximilian I, proved to be a stroke of genius, though it led to constant sibling rivalry and complex power dynamics. Ferdinand was intelligent, cautious, and deeply religious. A product of his Spanish upbringing, he was educated by the Spanish court, and his early life was immersed in the strict Catholic atmosphere of the Iberian Peninsula. Ferdinand's path to power was not simple. In 1521, Charles V formally granted him the Austrian lands, including Tyrol, Carinthia, Styria, and Carniola. This was a significant holding, but it came with immense challenges. The Ottoman Empire was a constant threat on the eastern border, and the Reformation was tearing apart the religious fabric of Germany. Then in 1526 a pivotal event occurred. King Louis II of Bohemia and Hungary, Ferdinand's brother-in-law, was killed fighting the Ottomans at the Battle of Mohacs. With no direct heir, Ferdinand, through his wife Anne Jagiellon, laid claim to the crowns of Bohemia and Hungary. He was elected King of Bohemia later that year, and after a struggle, King of Hungary in 1527. These acquisitions dramatically expanded Habsburg influence, but they also brought new problems: restive Protestant nobility in Bohemia and the ongoing brutal war with the Ottomans in Hungary. Ferdinand found himself on the front lines of the conflict with the Ottoman Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent. In 1529, Suleiman's armies reached the gates of Vienna, besieging the city in a desperate struggle. Ferdinand, though not personally present during the siege, had prepared Vienna's defenses, rallying support from various German princes. The Ottomans eventually withdrew due to bad weather and logistical challenges, but the threat remained. For decades, Ferdinand was engaged in a relentless struggle to defend his Hungarian territories and the Austrian heartland from Ottoman incursions. He spent vast sums of money and immense energy trying to secure his borders, often relying on financial and military aid from his brother Charles V. The religious turmoil of the Reformation was another defining challenge. Unlike his brother Charles V, who dreamed of a unified Catholic empire, Ferdinand understood the deep divisions that had taken root in Germany. He was a devout Catholic, but he was also a pragmatist. He recognized that forcing all German princes back to Catholicism was an impossible task. He participated in various diets or assemblies of the Holy Roman Empire, seeking compromise and solutions. In 1555, after years of intense negotiation and conflict, he brokered the Peace of Habsburg. This landmark agreement formally recognized Lutheranism as a legal religion within the Holy Roman Empire and established the principle of cuius regio, e religio, whose the region, his the religion. This meant that each German prince could choose the religion of his own state, and his subjects would have to follow suit or emigrate. While it did not grant full religious freedom to individuals, it brought a period of uneasy peace to the empire and fundamentally altered its religious landscape. In 1556, Charles V, weary of the burdens of his vast empire, abdicated his titles. He divided his domains, giving Spain and its overseas territories to his son, Philip II, and a Holy Roman Empire, along with the Austrian hereditary lands to his brother Ferdinand. Thus Ferdinand finally became Holy Roman Emperor, a position he had effectively been managing for years. He ruled for 8 more years, focusing on consolidating his power, dealing with the lingering religious issues, and continuing the struggle against the Ottomans. He centralized the administration of his Austrian lands, establishing new councils and government bodies that made the Habsburg monarchy more efficient. He fostered the development of education and culture. He was a keen linguist, reportedly speaking 7 languages. His court in Vienna became a significant political and cultural center. He married Anna of Bohemia and Hungary, a union that brought the crowns of those 2 kingdoms into the Habsburg fold, and laid the groundwork for the future multinational Habsburg monarchy. They had 15 children, a testament to their fruitful union and ensuring a strong line of succession. Ferdinand was known for his calm, thoughtful demeanor, a stark contrast to the often passionate Charles V. He preferred negotiation to confrontation when possible, though he was certainly capable of military action. He was deeply aware of his responsibilities as ruler and worked tirelessly to manage his vast and complex domains. He passed away in 1564, leaving behind a significantly strengthened and more cohesive Habsburg power base. He had navigated the turbulent waters of the Reformation and the Ottoman threat with remarkable skill, ensuring the survival and growth of his dynasty, and setting the stage for future Habsburg emperors. He was the quiet, steady hand that steered the Holy Roman Empire through one of its most challenging periods. Number 3. Charles V. Charles V, born in Ghent in 1500, was born into an astonishing inheritance. His grandparents included Maximilian I of Habsburg, Mary of Burgundy, Ferdinand II of Aragon, and Isabella I of Castile. This incredible lineage meant that by the time he was a young man, he had inherited an empire on which the sun truly never set. He became Duke of Burgundy in 1506, King of Spain in 1516, and then after a fiercely contested election, Holy Roman Emperor in 1519. His domains stretched from the Netherlands to Naples, from Spain to vast territories in the Americas, and across much of Germany. No European ruler since Charlemagne had commanded such an immense personal domain. This vastness, however, also meant constant challenges, as different parts of his empire had different laws, languages, and loyalties. Charles was a devout Catholic, and his vision was for a unified Christian Europe led by the Holy Roman Emperor. This vision immediately collided with 2 monumental forces, the Protestant Reformation and the Ottoman Empire. Just a year into his imperial reign in 1521, a relatively unknown German monk named Martin Luther was summoned before Charles at the Diet of Worms. Luther, who had challenged the authority of the Pope and the Catholic Church, refused to recant his writings. Charles declared him an outlaw, but Luther's ideas had already taken root. The Reformation exploded, tearing through Germany and splitting the Holy Roman Empire along religious lines. Charles spent decades fighting to suppress Protestantism, engaging in numerous wars against the Protestant princes of Germany, such as the Schmalkaldic War. He defeated them militarily at the Battle of Mühlberg in 1547, but he could not defeat the ideas that had spread so widely. The religious divisions remained a source of constant frustration and conflict throughout his reign. At the same time, the Ottoman Empire, under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, was pressing hard on Europe's eastern frontiers and in the Mediterranean. Ottoman armies besieged Vienna in 1529, a direct threat to the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. Charles dedicated significant resources to defending his eastern borders, often relying on his brother Ferdinand to lead the fight. In the Mediterranean, Ottoman fleets and their North African allies threatened Spanish trade routes in coastal cities. Charles personally led a naval expedition to Tunis in 1535, scoring a significant victory against the pirate Barbarossa and freeing thousands of Christian slaves. This showed his willingness to personally engage in military campaigns. His other major rival was France. Under King Francis I, France, encircled by Habsburg lands, viewed Charles's enormous power as a direct threat. This led to a series of costly and often indecisive wars in Italy and along the French-Habsburg borders. These wars drained Charles's treasury and diverted his attention from the religious strife within the empire. The constant warfare forced Charles to travel endlessly across his vast domains, holding diets, negotiating with princes, raising armies, and trying to manage his sprawling inheritance. He was a tireless traveler, crossing the Alps and the Pyrenees multiple times, sailing the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. He rarely stayed in one place for long. Charles was known for his calm and deliberate nature, his impressive ability to speak multiple languages, and his deep sense of duty. He was a physically imposing man, but he suffered from gout, a painful joint disease, which worsened as he aged. He was fond of food and drink, a pleasure that likely contributed to his health problems. Despite his immense power, he found himself constantly battling on multiple fronts, often feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scale of his responsibilities. He was deeply religious, but his faith was also practical and rooted in political realities. He understood the need for compromise, even if it went against his personal desires for religious unity. His personal life was less dramatic than his political one. He married Isabella of Portugal, a strong and intelligent woman who competently governed Spain in his long absences. They had several children, including his successor in Spain, Philip II. Charles's relationship with his brother Ferdinand was complex. While they cooperated on many issues, there was also a degree of rivalry and differing visions for the future of the Habsburg dynasty. By the mid-1550s, after decades of continuous struggle, Charles was utterly exhausted. He had failed to crush Protestantism, he had not decisively defeated the Ottomans, and he had spent a lifetime fighting France. His health was failing, and he felt he could no longer bear the immense burdens of his office. In a series of dramatic ceremonies in 1555 and 1556, he retired to a monastery in Eusta, Spain, where he spent his final years in quiet contemplation, surrounded by clocks and religious art, an emperor who voluntarily gave up the greatest throne in Europe. He passed away in 1558. Charles V's reign was a pivotal moment in European history, a period of unprecedented imperial power, religious revolution, and global exploration that forever changed the continent and the world. He was a ruler who attempted to hold back the tides of change, and in doing so shaped the very forces that would define the modern era. Number 2. Maximilian I. Maximilian I, born in 1459, was known as the Last Knight, and was a figure of boundless energy and grand ambition. His early life was steeped in the chivalric traditions of the late Middle Ages, but he also embraced the new technologies and political realities of the Renaissance. He was the son of Emperor Frederick III, a cautious and often slow-moving ruler, and the young Maximilian frequently chafed under his father's passive approach. From a young age, he displayed a fascination with warfare, hunting, and the romantic ideals of knighthood. He was skilled in jousting, a brave warrior, and an accomplished hunter. Maximilian's path to power was paved by a legendary marriage. In 1477, he married Mary of Burgundy, the richest heiress in Europe. This union, however, was not simply a love match, it was a political earthquake. Burgundy was a vast and wealthy territory, encompassing parts of modern-day Belgium, the Netherlands, and eastern France. This marriage instantly propelled the Habsburgs into the front ranks of European powers. However, Mary's inheritance was contested by the powerful King Louis XI of France, leading to years of warfare in the Low Countries. Maximilian, often leading his troops personally, fought fiercely to defend his wife's lands, proving himself a formidable military commander. Tragically, Mary died in 1482 after a hunting accident, leaving Maximilian with 2 young children and the daunting task of defending the Burgundian inheritance for his son, Philip the Handsome. His next strategic marriage, though not for himself, proved even more avid. He arranged the marriage of his son Philip to Joanna of Castile, the heiress to the unified crowns of Spain. This single union, later known as the double marriage, laid the groundwork for the colossal empire of his grandson, Charles V. Maximilian understood that marriages, not just wars, could build empires. His famous motto, Bella gerant ali, tu felix Austria nube. Let others wage wars, you fortunate Austria marry, perfectly captured his dynastic strategy. Maximilian became Holy Roman Emperor in 1493 after his father's death. His reign was a period of both significant innovation and constant struggle. He faced challenges from the German princes, who sought greater autonomy from France, which continued to covet Burgundian lands, and from the Ottoman Empire on his eastern borders. Despite these challenges, Maximilian pursued a vision of a modernized, centralized Holy Roman Empire. He introduced important reforms, establishing new administrative bodies, like the Imperial Chamber Court and the Imperial Regiment, though these were often met with resistance from the independent-minded princes. He was a great patron of the arts and sciences. He commissioned elaborate illustrated books about his life and family, employed famous artists like Albrecht Dürer, and fostered the development of printing technology. He also had a keen interest in military innovation, experimenting with new artillery and infantry tactics. He was a Renaissance prince who embraced new ideas while still clinging to the romantic ideals of medieval chivalry. Maximilian was often short on funds, a persistent problem for Holy Roman emperors. He constantly had to borrow money, pledge lands, and rely on the often grudging support of the imperial diet. This financial strain limited his ambitions and forced him into clever diplomatic maneuvers. Instead of outright conquest, he was a master of self-promotion and propaganda, using art and literature to craft his image as the ideal Christian knight and ruler. He meticulously planned his own magnificent tomb in Innsbruck, ensuring his legacy would be remembered. His personal life was marked by both grand successes and profound losses. After Mary's death, he married Bianca Maria Sforza of Milan, but this marriage produced no living children and was largely unhappy. He had several illegitimate children. His relationships with his own children, particularly his son Philip, were often strained, as Philip sometimes acted independently of his father's wishes. However, the dynastic strategy that Maximilian so carefully orchestrated came to fruition in his grandson Charles V, who inherited the combined Spanish and Habsburg empires, a testament to Maximilian's long-term vision. Maximilian also had a peculiar and persistent interest in attempting to become pope. He harbored a secret ambition to combine the spiritual authority of the papacy with the temporal power of the Holy Roman Empire. A truly unprecedented idea. He even made inquiries with cardinals about this possibility, though it never came to anything. He passed away in 1519, having truly transformed the Habsburg dynasty from a regional power into a continental force. He left behind a legacy of cunning diplomacy, strategic marriages, and a restless pursuit of glory. He was a bridge between the medieval and modern worlds. A knight who understood the power of a wedding ring as much as a sword. Number 1. Frederick III. Frederick III, born in 1415, was the first Habsburg to hold the title of Holy Roman Emperor for an extended period, reigning for an astonishing 53 years, from 1440 until his death in 1493. This made him the longest reigning Holy Roman Emperor in history. A quiet, almost legendary figure, whose very longevity was a testament to his unique style of leadership. Unlike many of his more flamboyant successors, Frederick was known for his extreme caution, his patience, and his deep-seated attachment to symbols and prophecies. His personal motto, AEIOU, Austria est Imperari, Orbi Universo, or Als Erdreich ist Österreich untertan. All the world is subject to Austria, was a testament to his vast if sometimes unrealized ambition for his family. He often carved this mysterious monogram onto his belongings, a private declaration of future Habsburg greatness. Frederick's early life was marked by the typical squabbles of the fragmented Holy Roman Empire. He inherited the Austrian duchies in 1424, but his path to the imperial throne was fraught with challenges. The empire, at the time, was a loose collection of states, and the emperor's power was often more theoretical than real. He was elected King of the Romans in 1440, a prelude to becoming emperor, but his authority was frequently questioned by powerful German princes, and even by his own Habsburg relatives. He faced numerous rebellions within his hereditary lands, constantly having to put down uprisings from rebellious nobles and local strongmen. He was often forced to flee Vienna, his capital, due to internal revolts. His reign was not characterized by grand military victories or sweeping reforms. Instead, Frederick's strength lay in his ability to simply outlast his opponents. He had an uncanny knack for waiting out his enemies, allowing them to exhaust themselves or fall into disarray before quietly reasserting his authority. He was often criticized for his slowness and indecisiveness, but this deliberate approach often paid off in the long run. He preferred diplomacy and legal maneuvering to direct military confrontation. For example, he spent years locked in disputes with the Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus, who even captured Vienna for a period. Frederick, however, never gave up his claim, patiently waiting for Corvinus's death, after which he was able to reclaim his capital and many of his lost territories. Frederick's most significant contribution to the Habsburg dynasty was not through conquest. He was instrumental in arranging the marriage of his son Maximilian to Mary of Burgundy. This single union brought the incredibly wealthy Burgundian Netherlands into the Habsburg fold, fundamentally transforming the dynasty's power and wealth. This was his greatest dynastic achievement, the fruit of his long-term vision for his family. He understood that strategic alliances formed through marriage could build an empire far more effectively than endless wars, setting the precedent for his son and grandson. Frederick was also the last Holy Roman Emperor to be crowned by the Pope in Rome, a grand ceremony in 1452 that connected him to a long tradition of imperial power. This journey to Rome was rare for an emperor, and symbolized his commitment to the historical legitimacy of his office. He was a collector of precious stones, an amateur botanist, and had a deep interest in astrology, believing that the stars held clues to future events. His court was relatively modest, and he was known for his frugality, often saving money to invest in land or support his family's growing power. His personal life was quiet and scholarly. He married Eleanor of Portugal, a politically advantageous match that helped secure his imperial title. They had several children, though only 2 survived to adulthood, his son Maximilian and a daughter, Kunigund. Frederick was known for his stoicism and his somewhat detached manner, often more interested in his garden or his studies than in the immediate political crises. He maintained a meticulous diary, noting down observations about the weather, his health, and political events, all written in his characteristic, somewhat secretive. Despite the criticisms from his contemporaries about his passivity, Frederick III laid the crucial groundwork for the future glory of the Habsburgs. He secured their long-term hold on the imperial title, expanded their territorial base through his son's marriage, and patiently weathered countless storms. He ensured the continuity of the Habsburg line and consolidated their position as a major European power, a foundation upon which Maximilian I and Charles V would build their vast empires. When he died in 1493, at the ripe old age of 77, he had seen his family transformed from regional dukes into the most powerful dynasty in Europe, a quiet testament to his enduring patience and strategic foresight.